Okay, welcome to part two in this three-part series where I'm showing you how I'm working on the creation of a new intro sequence for my online videos. So in part one we touched on the original sequence that I currently use, and if you haven't seen that video already, I'd recommend you go back and have a look at that first so you can see where we are at this point in time. Again, I'll put a link up here somewhere in the top right here, and again there's also going to be a link in the description below, so go and check that out if you want to. But other than that, I'm going to jump in now and I'm going to start and add some extra embellishments and some extra content to add out the video content for the new intro sequence. So let's carry on. Okay, so I've now started a new project in DaVinci Resolve, and this is what we're going to use to build the new opening sequence. So first of all, we're going to have to go in and we're going to have to import our previous video that we used before, where we showed the 10-second clip with the lightning, etc. And here it is. This is that particular clip. I'm just going to import that now, and what actually happens once I've imported it is it's now appeared on the second screen in our media content. So this section we had before to show what media we have available to us. What I'm going to actually want to do is I actually want to drag that across into my timeline. So if I now bring that across, add it to the new video and our new project, it's now in here on the timeline. Now the old video is 10 seconds in length. I want to make the new video 20 seconds in length. So what I'm going to do is just on the timeline here, I'm going to move this line so it comes in at 20 seconds. And then what I can do, this sequence we had before is going to be at the end of that 20-second sequence. So I can now take that, and because I've got snapping on, I can just drag this down on the timeline, and there we are. That's now the last 10 seconds of this timeline is going to be filled with that piece of video. So the plan for the new intro sequence is within this first period, I'm going to add some more clips, and I'm going to do a very similar effect to what we've got in here with the letters moving around. I'm going to have various video clips that are related to the content on the site that will fade in and move around the screen in various ways. And also I want to add some more lettering to represent the site branding or the channel branding, and so I will do some more lettering around this as well and have that in the background. So first of all, we're going to have to import one of the video clips, so I'll show you how I do that to bring the first video clip in and do the editing that we want to add the first section. So again, I'm just going to pick one of the clips, and I've set some clips aside ready that I want to go and use. So here's one clip I can go and do, and again I'll open that clip, and if we're going to look on the other screen again, we'll see that's now in the media sections as we had before, and I'm just going to drag that and bring it back into the main timeline again. Now what I'm actually going to do here initially is I'm just going to move the timeline across a little bit, because I'm actually going to, in the first instance, bring this onto the end of the timeline here, because I'm actually going to want to edit this and take a small section of this overall video. So let's zoom into the timeline view that we had previously so we can see what I'm doing in this particular space. And I want to go into here and just pick out a small section of video out of here somewhere. This looks like it might be an interesting section. It doesn't really matter too much what I put in there as content. So I'm just going to pick a section of video from here. I'm just going to cut this section out. So I can go into here and I can actually put a cut in there and split that video into two different pieces of content. And I want something that's probably about 5 seconds long. So you know that there, if we look at the timeline here, we can see we're looking at 2 minutes 13 into the video at that point. So if I move down there to somewhere around the 2 minutes 18 point, and I should be able to put another cut in there, and with the other cut in, I've now got a section in here that I can actually use as my content. So I just want to move out the bits I'm not going to do. So I'm going to highlight this particular section here, and I can just delete that section. And also with this piece from the front of the video that we're not using, again I can delete that. And one thing you have to be very careful with when you're moving sections of video around is you'll suddenly see all that video is gone. It's not there anymore. Actually, because you removed the piece in front of it, it's actually come all the way down to here because there was nothing taking that piece of content. So you just have to be very careful when you're deleting sections of video that you don't suddenly cut into other pieces of your content like this and affect your overall work. So what I'm going to do at this point is I actually want to add this to its own track. So I'm just going to drag this up a little bit, and you can see that's already split the video and audio into an audio 2 track and a video 2 track as well. Now I don't want the audio, from this piece of video. I just actually want the video content. So I'm actually going to go onto here now and select this piece of audio. I'm just going to go delete track. As you can see now the audio is gone, but the video content still exists. So because this video content is going to be used in front of this section from before, I'm just going to go and drag this and move it across into here. And you can see it's actually jumped across the timelines a little bit, but that's okay. I can move it back up where I want it into a separate channel. Now, again, just an important thing, when you're working with different clips, it's sometimes useful to have them on their own different channels here. It means you can actually apply different effects and parameters to individual clips and not affect the rest of the overall content that you're working on. So I've got this one piece of content in here now, and at the moment, as you can see up in here on the screen, we can't actually see anything, and that's because my timeline is off the screen. The point I picked on the timeline is off the screen here somewhere. If I just click on here to bring that timeline back in, voila, there we have the image I'm going to use. I actually want to do some effects on this image, so I'm actually going to shrink this down in size, and I'm going to get it to move across the screen and do various bits. However, because I want to apply some effects to it, and I actually want to just trim the edges a little bit to go and work with it, then I actually want to do that at a reasonably large size. So I'm not going to keep this clip at full screen like this, but obviously to apply some of the effects, you can see what you're doing better if you're in a larger size video clip. So what I'm going to do at this point is I can go into the transform window. So I just wanted to go back and change the view so you can see what I'm doing here. I'm going to go into these controls from before in the inspector. And on the zoom control, I'm simply going to bring this down a little bit, so it's still quite large. We can still see how we're working with it, but it's not taking up the whole of the screen at this point. And the reason why I've just zoomed it down a little bit is just to show these edges. So at the moment, these are obviously very sharp edges. You just got the video zoomed down, and if I'm going to do a transition where this is going to move around the screen, if I just bring this down to a much smaller size, and then I actually start to change the position of it, as you can see, it's quite harsh against that background. So there is a way to go and deal with that. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to come into the cropping section for this video, and although I don't want to actually crop any of the content out necessarily, I'm going to adjust the softness control. And by adjusting the softness control, I can bring a nice soft edge around that piece of video. All of a sudden, now if you were to move that piece of video backwards and forwards across the screen, it's actually going to look a lot smoother and a lot nicer when it's transitioning around than it would do with a hard edge to it. That's the first effect and the first change we've done to that clip. Now the next change I want to make to this clip is I'm going to add a little bit of an effect to it, just to give it a little bit of age and just change the video a little bit, just make it a little bit more dynamic in its appearance. So in order to do that, I'm actually going to go onto my other screen, and I'm going to go through this filters list that we had before. And as you go down this filters list, I can find a filter down there, and one of the filters I've got a filter down here called film damage. I'm actually going to apply that to the clip that we've got. So with both screens open, I can actually take my mouse, I can get the film damage texture effect, and I can actually just drag that across onto my timeline and on top of the actual clip that I want to actually apply it to. So I do that, I click it in there, and all of a sudden you can now see that clip has actually changed a little bit. It's now added some sort of off colour and added a little bit of a scratch effect in there. You can't see it too much, but if I start to move the screen a little bit, you can now see there's a little bit of a scratch effect going on one side and some other changes in there. And on the timeline here, if we move into the timeline, we can actually see those that a little bit clearer and what effect it's actually having in there. I actually want to apply some edits to that and change how this effect is actually working a little bit. So if we actually go and look at the inspector, and again we've got all the transformation bits for the video, but also at the top section here we've now got as our secondary panel the OpenFX section, and this is where the film damage effect has been added, and these are the settings for the film damage effect. What I'm actually going to go and do is I'm actually going to go to my clip and I'm going to add a few more of these scratch marks in there, and I'll probably take out some of this discolouring that's been added. I don't want so much of that in there, but I'll add a little bit more dirt to the picture and a few other little effects. So I'm going to do that now, and then we'll come back to and show you what I've actually applied. Okay, so I've added some more scratches and a few other effects onto this bit of a clip now and just changed it to do something that I want it to do, bits of dirt and stuff. You can now say it's, you can see the effect that that's having as you move backwards and forwards through the timeline of this clip. So now that I can see what I've actually done with it, what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to go and go back into my inspector and I'm actually going to the video settings and I'm actually going to change the zoom level, change the position on the screen, and then we'll actually put some animation in to move it across the screen at a certain point. I'm just going back into the full screen so you can see what I'm doing on here now. I'm just going to go back in and I'm going to bring this right down to a much smaller clip. I'm actually going to start quite small with this clip initially. I just want to move it to the original starting position. So I'm going to move it across the screen a little bit and bring it down to a point I want to start from. So let's have a clip that's going to start here and we're going to move it across the screen to here somewhere. So as we did previously, you saw you can actually set the values at a particular point in the timeline. So now on the very last frame of this clip, I'm actually going to go in here and I'm going to say, actually, this is the value I want for the positioning, this is the value I want for the zoom. I'm going to leave the opacity just for a moment, but we will actually come back to that shortly. At the moment we want to be able to see what we're working with. And what I actually want to do is go, actually, when the clip starts, move back to the very first frame in that particular clip. And then what we're going to do is actually going to move this across the screen. And we're going to move it up somewhere. So bring it to this particular position here. We're actually going to bring the zoom level up quite a bit. So I actually want it to be about this big on the screen when it gets to the end section. However, I'm actually going to zoom out again, as you'll see in a moment. So again, because I've actually changed those values and we're actually set on this value in the timeline, it's automatically added those check marks in there to tell me at that particular point we want to be on those particular values. So again, if I go through these frames, and now you can see as I move through those frames, it will actually go down and shrink, disappear off the screen down there. Now, one other change I want to make is that I obviously don't want this clip to just suddenly appear at this point, because as you can imagine, you're going along, then all of a sudden, bang, it appears on the screen. That's not exactly a great way of doing things. But what I do want to do is have the clip to be fully visible at a certain point in time. So maybe at this point here, we could say that it's actually going to be at its maximum opacity and mainly visible on the screen. So again, as before, in the timeline, this is where I want it to be at its peak point. But I actually want to set this now to have the opacity at this point at 100%. But at the start and end of the clip, I want it to fade in from nothing. So we can just set this and put the opacity to 0 here, and then at the end of the clip here I can go back to the very last frame in there and just go through using the cursor keys just to get through to the very last frame down here. And again, at the last frame in the clip, I want this to be completely off the screen. And what we get now, if we go through and actually play the clip a little bit, it fades in, it'll come up to its maximum opacity, and then it'll actually disappear and zoom off the screen. Now I also want to add some branding that's going to be on the screen for most of the clip. And so what I'm actually going to do in here now, I'm actually going to add a new track in here, and I'm going to want to add some text onto that track. So I can go into my text list over here. I'm going to the titles and there's a text effect here. I'm going to drag that text in onto the timeline over here, and so there we go, and put it onto the video track number 3. So now if I select this bit of text, the inspector's opened up and showed me the values for the text in here. Now this bit of text I actually want to apply for virtually the whole length of the video. I can obviously use the opacity to set when it starts and when it doesn't. So I'm actually just going to drag this layer across pretty much the entire timeline here. And now there we are, there's my bit of text in there. And actually what I actually want to do with the text is I actually want it to match the banding that sits at the final part of the screen here. I'm going to change the wording, and we'll start off with the second word in there and just change that to bits. And then I also want to go in and change the font and the size to match the letter in here so that it sits within that same space later in the timeline. So I will change the font, and then we also need to increase the size so that it matches that text up there. Now, in order to get that into the right part and get the size set, I'm just going to go to the video options in here, and I can actually, again, as with all the other sections, stuff and sections that we use, I can just move this to approximately where it needs to be, and go back in and adjust the size again. That's a little bit bigger than we wanted. That's close to what we want, but again, let's just try and get this lined up as best we can. See, that's a little bit too big. We'll bring it down a little bit further, and that's looking pretty close to where we want to be. So it doesn't have to be exact, but I do want it to be reasonably close. And we can also move the Y position on here as well, so that it sits over the top of the original text. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another layer for the tmonkey section as well. So I'll just go and do that, and then we'll come back to show you what I've got. Now, in the case of both of these bits of text, I'm actually going to want them to disappear before the main text actually gets lined up properly. So as these bits are starting to come in from the original video, I actually want to make sure that the text that was sitting there previously has disappeared. So I'm going to pick a time just around here somewhere. And for both of these layers now, we actually want to just mark this time in there. So I'm literally at this point just going to mark the opacity layer in there for now on both of these selections of clips. Because these are both marked now, I know what time frame and what keyframe along this animation I actually want these two bits of text to go and disappear from. And the other thing we also know is that at this particular point we're going to want these pieces of text to be lined up in this part of the screen. So again, for both parts, I'm going to go into the inspector and just indicate that at that particular point in time, at that keyframe, that's the exact positioning that I want those two different tracks to be laid out at. Now also, in this particular case, going to want both of these words to actually start to appear in the final output at the same time as well. So I'm actually just going to set a time down here, and I'm going to set them quite early on into the video when they first start to appear. And again, for both of them at this point, I'm just going to set the start position for them and the opacity for them. And now we can work on these two pieces independently, knowing they're going to start in the correct place and they're going to finish in the correct place as well. So the effect that I'm actually going to apply to these two pieces of text is just to have them judging around on the screen roughly where they are. I'm going to move to this top one first and pick the first word in there. And we're literally going to go through and just pick some random spaces along the timeline and just change the positioning that the wording is in at those points in time. So let's go into the video point here, and I'm going to move forward a little bit, go through the timeline. And at this point in the timeline here, I'm going to say actually I want it to be, and then we're going to go a bit further forward in the timeline and say at that point in time I actually want it to come back up a little bit from there and change its position that way a little bit. And we're just going to keep going like that through the video and doing some bits. So I'm just going to pause this for now, and then I'll show you the effect once I've finished putting all the time points in. Okay, so I've put some timelines in and some movement in for the first word now, and as you can see, if I'm moving through, this is what it's actually going to do. It's just going to bounce around a little bit within that area. So I'm going to go and do exactly the same again for the second word. Okay, so those keyframes have been applied to both of the words now, and as you can see, they're just going to move around like that a little bit, just wiggle around on screen, which is fine until they get to their final resting place. Now again, in both cases, the actual wording here is going to be quite subtle. I don't want it at the full opacity at any point in time. So I'm going to go back into the timelines here, and what I'm actually going to do is I need to go and find the end frame on these. And as we saw from before, both of them are at 12 seconds and 36 frames is where we get the end point on here. And for each of these, I actually want them to fade out at that point. I don't want them to be visible at this point in the video. So with these two particular tracks, I'm going to start with the first track, and what I'm actually going to set at this point, I'm actually going to make it invisible at this point by setting the opacity to 0. I'm going to go back about 1 second, so let's move the timeline back to about 11:36 instead, and we can just set 15 in there for the opacity on the first word, and then do the same again at this exact same point in time here, and just set that also to 15. They are both the same brightness, and that's as bright as we're actually going to have those words at any point during the cycle. So we go all the way back to the start, and we come back to the very first point when these appear is at the 30 frames into the video. We want to do a similar effect at this end as well. So we're going to set the opacity to 0 on both of the tracks, and then we're going to move 1 second forward from there. 1 second, 30 frames into the sequence, and for each of these now, again, we'll do the same thing. We're going to turn the opacity keyframe on at that point and set the value to 15, and then for the second word, we'll do exactly the same again at this point. Set that as a marker in there and set that to 15, and they should now stay at that between those two, these start and end points of the video. So if I just run through the timeline now, we can see as we come in, those two bits will move, but they never actually get any more visible on screen than where they are there, and then they fade away before the last part of the video will actually kick in. So having done that now, what I'm going to go into is going to add a few more pieces of video in, similar to that clip that goes through here. So I want some more video clips in there. I want a little bit more text in there, a few other bits of effects, and some other bits to represent the site or whatever, to make up the overall animation that we're going to use, the overall clip that we're going to have as the opening sequence. So I'm going to go and add all those extra clips and so on now into the overall video, and then we'll come back and show you what it looks like at the end. Okay, so I've now added several extra tracks in. You can see those listed down here in the different tracks. Now, one of the key things to notice down here is this particular piece of text we had before with the two words. And what I actually did is I've actually decided to go away and join those two bits of text together, and then I've applied a piece of video behind them to create a sort of effect with them. So we just zoom in a little bit closer onto the actual timeline. And I'll just move forward in time to around here somewhere. So there's the two words as they appeared previously, and if I just move very slowly through here, you can probably just about make out on the words that there's a sort of a little effect going on behind them a little bit. Now, the way I actually got the texture on there was to actually take another piece of video and combine it with the actual text. It's actually a slow motion piece of video of some water falling down, cascading down some steps that I took previously one day. I actually applied that to the two words in the text layer that we had previously, and you can just about make out, if you look very carefully, you'll almost see the sort of water moving behind those two words. And so I joined those three layers together as a compound layer, so that the effect of the water in the video is only being applied to the text. It doesn't get applied to all of the other tracks that we've added into the final piece. And so, as I say, there's just some other little bits of video in that we've put into there, a number of pieces in there, and there was also another text layer, or a couple of text layers that I put in as well. So there's some text appears in places. And I'm just going to very quickly just go through the timeline as it is now, just give you a rough idea of what we're looking at and the overall effect, with all the different pieces moving around. And of course we then pick up towards the end the old swirly text that we brought in from the original introduction video that we wanted to keep. Now, what I'm going to do at this point is I'm actually going to render what we've got at this stage and actually export it, because I still need to add some more audio. So at the moment we have just the sound of the thunder that appears at the end, but this is now a 20-second clip rather than 10 seconds we had before. So I'm actually going to go and compose my own piece of audio to just run through the first sort of 15-18 seconds or so of the clip before the thunder comes in. And so if I render what I've got so far in the presentation, I can actually import that into my DAW, which is a digital audio workstation where I'm going to compose the music. That will allow me to I have the video feed in there as well, so I can see how I'm composing the music over the top of the video. Okay, so that's the end of part 2 in this 3-part series. We've now pretty much got all of the video work in place that I want in the new intro sequence. The next stage is to go and actually score a piece of music to sit underneath that and play alongside it. So again, there's going to be a link here if you want to follow this link to go to part 3 to see how I do that. And again, I've also going to put the link in the description below as well. So let's go ahead and do it. So I look forward to seeing you in part 3, and we'll go and compose some music.